The Reverend Fred Hinz serves as the public policy advocate for the Minnesota North and South districts of the LCMS. In this role, he represents the LCMS on matters pertaining to life issues, marriage, family, sexuality, and religious freedom. He's a graduate of Concordia, Nebraska, Chicago State University, and Luther Northwestern Seminary. Reverend Hinz has taught biological science at both the high school and college levels. He's owned and operated retail shoe stores, served as a parish pastor in St. James, Minnesota, and Gaylord, Minnesota. Reverend Hinz and his wife Rachel have been married for 40 years.
47.
47. Oh, we haven't updated this.
Yeah, I know.
They have, you still got 3 children?
Yes.
And 12 grandchildren?
Yes.
Okay. And they still reside in Gaylord, Minnesota?
Yes.
Yes. Reverend Hinz, you have the mic.
Great. Thank you. Thanks. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. I think I can speak for all of us when I say that we've had a real treat here the last 24 hours. We've been, thanks to doctors Price and Moss and McPherson and pastors Eidsmo and Grills, we've gotten some really eloquent and I think articulate discussions about the two kingdoms theory, two kingdoms doctrine. In order to speak as well as they did, it clearly requires them to have been very studied in that over a long period of time, and I appreciate that very much. Essentially, as I take their presentations as a whole, they were teaching us how to think about the relationship of church and state, about the relationship of a Christian citizen with their government. They were giving us some great principles to help us rightly conceive of the way in which God rules this world that He created, 2 distinct ways. We, of course, have spoken about the right-hand kingdom, which is shorthand for the church. And of course, in that right-hand kingdom, God rules largely through the work of His Son, Jesus Christ. That saving word is by far the most important thing that we need to be proclaiming. However, there is a second way, distinct way, in which God rules the world here, and that is through various created orders. We think about the family, we think about the state, of course, and work, a variety of other places where we spend our time and in which there is order, and we're thankful for that. In the end, while the right-hand kingdom is clearly the most important and one that deserves our most continuous attention, it is the left-hand kingdom that I'm going to speak a little bit more about today. That left-hand kingdom speaks about the way it is that God preserves or that keeps chaos at bay in our daily lives. Last night, those of you that heard Dr. McPherson speak, he, of course, referred to the idea that the right ordering of things in the left-hand kingdom is the thing that allows you to walk the streets and do so with a sense of safety. And so we as Christians have an interest in both of those things, but always want to maintain that order of priority. Right-hand kingdom certainly takes precedent over the left. Now, our earlier speakers taught us how to think about those things. That is a relatively easy thing to do relative to how to do second kingdom, two kingdom theology. Talking about it, trying to describe what it is, relatively easy compared to actually getting out in the world and doing it. And it is, in fact, that doing of the two kingdoms that I want to talk about. How it is that we live our daily lives in a way that is truly concerned about our neighbor, maintaining good order in our communities, so that, in the end, the gospel can be proclaimed clearly. That ordering of life in the left-hand kingdom is a relatively messy thing, okay? And so while the papers that were presented earlier were nice and orderly and well conceived, this presentation is not going to have that kind of character because it talks about, as I said, a much messier part of our lives. So it is my intention then to talk about essentially what an applied two kingdoms doctrine looks like. It is to describe not the way to do it, because there is no one way, but rather to describe a way that has been developed, is in the process of being developed in a particular place at a particular time. That particular place is my home state of Minnesota, and the time frame is, well, I've been at this since about 2013, so 10, 11, 12 years. That's the cultural context in which this we have developed this idea of what an applied two kingdoms doctrine looks like. Now, the official title that I have, as was mentioned by Caleb, I'm called the Public Policy Advocate. When I meet people for the first time and they ask me what I do, I say, well, I'm a pastor, but I have kind of a unique calling. I serve as a public policy, depending on where I'm at. Sometimes I say public policy director. People can understand that a little bit better. But regardless of which terminology I use, especially if they are LCMS Lutherans, they get a very quizzical look in their face. A public policy advocate, a pastor who intentionally engages with the public world, especially the political world. Historically, that's not something that is common among us in LCMS circles. And so I just want to emphasize that the way we have been developing that in Minnesota, it is just one way. You will have to do whatever translating is necessary to adapt this to whatever your setting is, political or cultural setting. I guess another thing I should say at the outset is that somebody mentioned earlier, used the image of a unicorn, something that we are able to talk about but isn't necessarily real. Well, I guess I consider myself a unicorn, a one-of-a-kind, because even though I've been doing this for about a dozen years, to my knowledge, I'm still the only guy that does this with that kind of a title anywhere in the LCMS. It has not caught on like gangbusters, but in the end, many different districts do the same things that I do. It's just that they don't invest that responsibility in one office, in one person. So, as I indicated earlier, I've been at this since about 2013. I hope to do it for a while longer, although I do have to tell you I'm in the process of bringing on a replacement to myself, a young guy who has great qualifications simply because he has some familiarity with the public policy world, the world of politics, much more than a typical pastor would. So we're in about a 2-year transition phase, getting toward we're into the second year of it now. When I stepped into this position, knowing what the historic viewpoint of the LCMS was in terms of the institutional church actively engaging with the political sphere, I was very concerned about the kind of reception that I would get, or the concept would receive. I'd have to tell you, I've been very pleased, surprised, really, that it has been so well accepted. The idea that you would have a pastor whose task it is to help the church and lay people understand what's going on in the public sphere from the viewpoint of Scripture and from what our church body has historically said about these issues. But nevertheless, it was comforting to me to find a source where you can find justification for this kind of active engagement with the public world. Many of you are probably aware that we have a national advocate, has a similar calling to me, but on the national level, and that would be Pastor Greg Seltz. He spends his time in Washington, and essentially, one of the first things he did when he came to Washington, which is probably approaching 10 years ago, maybe not quite, he wrote some really easy to understand, straightforward papers. He calls them his mom and pop papers, and several of them deal with the idea of how is it that it's legitimate for us to deal as directly with the political world as we have been doing. So I'd like to recommend that you go to his site. He, of course, it's the Lutheran Center for Religious Liberty. I forget the website, but it's easy to find. And there you can find those mom and pop papers, and I think you'll find them edifying. So what is my responsibility? Well, it is primarily to help both the church and its members to be more effective in the left-hand kingdom. How is it that you can best show the love of neighbor when it comes to engaging your citizenship? And so that's, in a nutshell, that's what I do. Now, I mentioned earlier that the approach that we've decided to take in Minnesota is a unique one because we have somebody like myself, a person who's responsible for this. Other districts do it differently. This was kind of the brainchild of our district president about 12, 13 years ago. Dean Natesty was his name. So I really want to credit him with the courage, really, to initiate something like this and see where it went. At the time I was called to be an assistant to the president, if you go back in time to 2010, 2011, so forth, you may recall that the issue of same-sex marriage was really a hot topic, was developing rather rapidly. And many states were in the process of trying to fend off the possibility of same-sex marriage. And so a lot of states were trying to pass amendments, state constitutional amendments that would prohibit that. Minnesota was one of those states. If you also recall back to that time, many of those states, which if you actually took a polling of the populace, those amendments should have passed rather easily. They did not always, and probably the majority of time, they did not. And that was the case in Minnesota. The forces advocating for these kind of radical changes in our culture marshaled enough enough dollars and enough influence that it was defeated. And not only was that defeated, but in almost a boomerang effect, all of a sudden the state legislature actually passed a law legitimating same-sex marriage. It was just a real whiplash kind of event. That had a real sobering effect on a lot of people, including, I think, our district presidents. And so the way our district president, Nadesty, chose to respond was to say, we need to have somebody who's able to speak to the culture, to the media, and present a biblical, conservative Lutheran perspective on these. If you know anything about Lutheranism here in the United States, you know that up in the upper Midwest, Minnesota in particular, certainly LCMS, Wisconsin Synod are well represented there, but by far the dominant force is the ELCA. And so when the media wanted to find out what a Lutheran would think about this particular topic, they inevitably wound up going to somebody from the ELCA. And that was very aggravating for those of us that knew that there was a broader spectrum of thought. So originally, that's what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to be that guy who the media could come to, and I could give them that perspective. As things have evolved, however, in the interim, meanwhile, of course, the number of issues has grown significantly. The impact on our culture has increased to a huge degree, to the point where it appeared obvious that there was no way you could limit yourself just to a situation where the media might approach us and we could give them some good answers. And so the office, my office, has evolved rather quickly so that it's now a much more comprehensive, multifaceted role that I play. And that's really my purpose here, is to give you a little taste for what it has become, at least in our part of the world. It'll probably be different where you live, but this is how things have developed. So, after I introduce myself to people as the public policy advocate, again, they get that kind of screwed up look on their face and they don't really know what it means. Usually the second question out of their mouth is, well, are you a lobbyist? Does that mean you're a lobbyist? And, well, I don't really struggle with that too much. Yes, I do a little bit of that, but it is just a small part of my time and energy gets devoted to that. I spend lots of time testifying before committees of the state legislature. People want to know if I'm an activist, an organizer, the kind of thing that I think it was Barack Obama was a community organizer before he made his move in politics. I maybe do a little bit of that. Depends on the definition of the term. And in essence, I do some of a lot of things, including those things that I just mentioned to you. But really, what I spend most of my time doing is acting as a networking person, a trust-building person, because it quickly became obvious that if we were going to be effective in impacting the culture at all for the benefit of the gospel in the end, that it was going to take joint action with other like-minded people. And so we simply had to get to know each other. All the, different church bodies, most notably the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, they of course have been the ones who have stood alone for the most part in the public sphere on many of these issues. So they were absolutely thrilled to have some other church body come alongside of them. But we also deal with many other organizations, again, on an issue-by-issue basis. The coalitions that are formed really vary greatly. So If I was to give you a little sampling of what it is I do, what I hope to accomplish, the first thing I came to understand was that by simply being a public figure out in the political realm, I was giving permission to pastors especially, but lay people as well, to talk about these issues that the church was concerned about. Again, given the historic background of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, pastors were always quite reticent, and generally appropriately so, to speak about these things, especially from the pulpit. But even in more of a teaching setting, they were uncomfortable talking about that. So this gave them some degree of permission to talk about issues, and it kind of gave them the spectrum of issues that the church would speak to and that they could legitimately speak to. The second most important thing that I try to accomplish is to be a source of reliable information to, yes, our pastors, but lay people as well. I endeavor to be a person who spends a lot of time absorbing the political happenings in our state, reducing them, kind of distilling them down into the major issues, and then putting out some kind of an explanation of that to our people on a somewhat regular basis. That meaning anywhere from every other week to every month. It depends on how much is going on in the state at the time. So we fairly early on developed something called a blog. We call it One Voice for Public Policy in Minnesota. And I brought along with me some examples of the kinds of things that I put out to, typically they get emailed to all of our called workers and interested laity. We have a list of probably about 3,000 people that receive this on a regular basis. So if you're interested in getting a flavor for how it is that an LCMS pastor speaks about these issues, they are at the registration table. I think there are 5 of them. One of them includes something entitled A Lutheran Citizenship Guide. Now, saying that, I can imagine there might be a little squirming going on out there because it sounds a lot like a Lutheran voter guide, which I think is still beyond the pale for us in that it would recommend actual candidates for you to look favorably on. We do not do that. We remain strictly issue-oriented, and therefore any guide that we would put out would always be structured in terms of analyzing issues and not assigning specific candidate names. But you could read that and see how we have handled that in the past. Also, there is well, for lack of a better description, it's a job description for me. I'm only going to be able to touch on a little bit of what I do here, and so if you're interested in getting a fuller picture, pick that up also at the registration desk. All right. What else do I do? Well, I spend time developing a relationship with legislators. I do take special care to identify and to develop a relationship with legislators that are Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And so I try to present to them, first of all, to lift up their office as a legislator as a very important of their element of their baptismal calling, so that they, if they don't already understand, begin to appreciate the fact that they have a high calling because of their baptized status. I also try to spend time with them. Sometimes we gather them together in small caucus sessions in our state legislature. That's usually 9 or 10 people, our LCMS, and we'll talk about the church's perspective on some issues that we know are going to be upcoming in the legislature. So I do that kind of lobbying. And that's, lobbying has such a, well, kind of a dirty connotation to it. It doesn't have to be, and in most cases it is not. But this is much more of a give and take between the legislators and myself. I also spend a fair amount of time trying to be a filter for our district presidents. Minnesota is divided into North and South districts, and I serve both of those districts. Our DPs, they're very busy people. Some of them have an inclination toward political kinds of things. They gravitate toward that naturally. Others do not. And so I'm the guy that kind of looks at what's happening as time goes by, flags issues that I think the church will want to pay attention to, make sure that the DPs are up on that, and then, of course, they can, from that point, provide their counsel back to me and through me to legislators. Most of the time, the issues that are being dealt with in the legislatures are not issues that the district presidents are going to speak directly to. In most cases, I'll be the guy who puts out like these blogs representing our general viewpoint on a particular topic. But occasionally, the district presidents will consider an issue of such extreme importance that they then will become the mouthpiece for that. Sometimes I help them write some of those, sometimes not. It depends. I mentioned earlier that in the work that I do, that our church body does, we would be very ineffective if we tried to do it on our own. And so early on, we spent quite a bit of time trying to develop coalitions, like-minded people with respect to certain issues. And we in Minnesota, we've actually been instrumental in founding 2 of coalitions like that. One of them has to do with the issue of physician-assisted suicide. You know that's has been an issue of where there's growing pressure, especially over the last 6, 7, 8 years. There was no group in the state of Minnesota to bring like-minded people together, and so together with the Roman Catholics, as well as some disability rights organizations, some elder care organizations, we founded something called the Minnesota Alliance for Ethical Healthcare. I sit on that board as a representative of the church, and I can report that we've been quite effective. While there are now, I think, 11 states in which physician-assisted suicide is legal, they have tried in Minnesota every year for the last 8 years, and we have prevented it from going anywhere. They haven't even gotten a committee hearing yet. So we've been quite effective, and we're happy about that. The other area that we helped found a coalition centers on the issue of parental choice in education. So we helped to form what was called OAK, Opportunity for All Kids, and we've been the organization that has shepherded our efforts to get school choice in Minnesota for the last 10 years. We've written legislation virtually every year. We currently have an education savings account bill in front of our state legislator. legislature. It will not pass. We're realists. Those of you that know about our current governor, that simply, he would not allow that. But we're hopeful for new elections and new changes in the body politic. This probably is the most hope-filled area that we have now. If any of you are following the issue of school choice nationally, it is just exploding. Unfortunately, that's not true yet in the state of Minnesota, but, well, even here in Wyoming, you heard Representative Ocean Andrew, is that his last name? Give just a wonderful presentation the other evening. Last night, I guess it was. And so you should be really thankful if you are a Wyomingite that you have such people. And other states have also been quite effective. Texas, of course, just passed a big school choice bill a month or 6 weeks ago, and others are in the process as well. So I'm the guy then that represents the church to all those different groups. There are many other organizations that pre-existed my coming into this office, and so we're engaged in many of those as well. One of the other things that we do, since many of our Orthodox Lutheran brethren in smaller synods, Wisconsin Synod, AFLC, some of the others, they are not large enough, basically, to have a person dedicated to this. In a sense, I wind up serving them as well, at least trying to be a source of information that they can trust. And so there are occasions when it's necessary we want to speak as a Lutheran voice into the public arena. And so we've developed enough good relations with those different church bodies that when an issue like this comes up, we put the word out, we'll call them together, the presidents typically of those bodies, and they come. We have developed enough trust to allow people who unfortunately have a lot of other suspicions about each other, and we guard our independence quite closely. But on these public policy issues, we've gotten to the point where we now can speak. So, for example, during the COVID years, when our government did decide that we were not an essential service and essentially shut down the churches for an extended period of time, it was that group, that joint group of Lutherans that came together, composed a letter, sent it to our governor, also allied ourselves with a legal representative. Maybe some of you are familiar with the Beckett Fund. They're a large national organization. And so we were able to essentially demonstrate to the governor that we were not going to accept this. And we sent him the letter. We set a date that we said we will file the lawsuit on this date, and the governor caved the day before. So we didn't actually have to do that. That made quite a bit of national news. Some of you may have heard about that. It was a shocker on a couple of counts. First of all, that we quietistic Lutherans got worked up enough to actually take that kind of a public stand, and that we were willing to do it with the Roman Catholic Church. That opened a lot of eyes. And so that's just one example of several times when that has happened recently. One of the most challenging things for me personally, and I think for the church in general, the church has been pretty clear about those issues that we will speak to, and I will name them here in a little while. But it so happens that at this juncture in time, in the political setting that we're in here in this country, the place where the church comes down on virtually all of the major public policy issues happens to be on the same side as one particular political party. And so it has been a fine line to walk, to be seen by our people as genuinely issue-oriented, genuinely nonpartisan, while at the same time speaking with enough clarity and truthfulness, even when people will make the accusation that we have become partisan. That's a difficult thing that we, to some degree, dance around, but we try not to do too much dancing. We really do want to get good information to our people, and if that has the side effect of seeming that we have taken a partisan leaning, well, I guess we've been willing to do that. So, with that, I want to take just a minute. I've spoken long enough and introduced enough different ideas. I want to give you a chance to ask questions that you might have. We'll do it for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I have other materials to share with you. So, any questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you for your talk. My father was in the Minnesota legislature for 6 years and helped carry the marriage amendment that was voted down in 2013. And I left Minnesota in 2018, became a Wyomingite. I know a lot of other people who are friends of mine here in Casper who've left other places in the country that are difficult, political landscapes, and come here. So I wanted to know, what's your perspective on remaining in a difficult place, politically, and what it means to keep fighting, and what's achievable, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so what's achievable? Many things are achievable, and in fact, in my view, we really have turned a corner, even in places like Minnesota, so that we really are being heard by a large portion of not just right-leaning folks, but also anybody with an open mind to wanting the best government they can have. So we do have access to the media outlets that we feel that we need, and in fact, I think there's a palpable swing. We saw a little bit of it, of course, in the presidential election from last year. But even in places like Minnesota, the margin, we were like a 5% Democratic-leaning state 2 years before that. That was narrowed to about 1.5%. So that kind of evolution is happening. So in the end, I'm optimistic, and I think we have good warrant for staying and fighting, staying and being engaged in the public debate. Anything else? Yes, sir.
In your collaboration with other public policy officials, is there a consensus on the rapidity of the transgender movement, how this has just kind of caught on fire? It seems to me that the redefinition of the family came upon us so quickly, and these fundamental issues, the definitions of family, the church, family, human sexuality, and so forth, how quickly this has seemed to have taken place. Any thoughts on that?
Sure. How could you not think about that? The pace has been quickening noticeably. It's quite clear, I think, from anybody that spends time studying this, that this is not a reflection of a grassroots change in attitudes. These are highly orchestrated issues that and well-funded issues. But it has become clear enough now where these various issues lead. For example, transgenderism. Just from a medical point of view, it is so clear now that this is detrimental to the health, certainly of children, but of society in general as well. That in the end, even though they achieved a remarkable amount of they interpose themselves in society to a remarkable degree. That's turning around. And common sense is finding a new voice. And so, again, it's an experience that I think we all would have thought we would never have, that our country would have swung so quickly on issues like this. But I believe that we likely will have a pendulum moving back again, and that it's already beginning. Now, am I using rose-colored glasses? I don't know. I don't think so, because I actually spend quite a bit of time reading. And even people on the left are beginning to acknowledge that we have done real damage to our culture, to our government, and they too are looking for something other than the radical left. Over here. Yeah.
Could you say more of how and why your committee has been so successful with the assisted suicide debate?
Sure. Successful with regard to assisted suicide, first of all, because it did not become an exclusively partisan issue. There have been and continue to be folks in the Democratic Party on the left that have concerns about this. They may not be theologically grounded, as Professor Moss indicated. They have their own set of reasons for wanting to oppose these kinds of things. And in the coalitions that we build, we really try to act with prudence. In other words, what arguments will we use in the public sphere to raise a red flag about an issue like this? We probably will not choose to quote Scripture as our first action. That certainly can come, and depending on the setting, we will, of course, be willing to do that. But these coalitions that we're a part of, they are very well run. We're not just a ragtag bunch. We do polling, our own polling, and so we have a pretty good sense of what kind of arguments people will respond to, and then are able to actually implement those communication strategies. Does that mean 10 minutes, period? Oh, golly. That's my wife. Is it real quick? Yeah.
First, I wanted to say thank you. I think your job is very fascinating, very important. I'm not in the Wyoming district or in your home district. If I wanted to bring this concept back to my own district president or to people in my own church, I think that there are lots of politically motivated people in this room and in the church, as we saw from our presentations today and yesterday. How would I go about that best? And then would you also be a resource to my church or to my state for that?
Yes, I would be happy to be that. As I said, there is now another fella that will take this office shortly, and I'm sure that is the case with him as well. If you pick up some of the materials that I posted back there, one of them clearly states what it is that I do. So you'd want to share that with either district leadership or congregational leadership. Otherwise, just give me a call, and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. Okay, I need to press on. So one of the questions that inevitably gets asked is, well, what issues are you willing to speak to? What issues is the church legitimate in speaking to? And so the criteria that we have used are really two primary ones and a third lesser one. First of all, we will speak to only things that Scripture speaks to clearly and unambiguously. If that is not the case, then while you may have an issue or have an interest in that particular issue, and you may be active in that, we as the institutional church will not. So it needs to be clear in terms of biblical grounding. And then most often we look to what the church, either on the district level or on the synodical level, has said about a particular issue. The greater the degree to which our church body has spoken in an official form, the more comfortable I feel in advocating for that. Now, the third criteria, there are many issues where I think there would be a high percentage of agreement that, take gambling, for example. Most Lutherans, most Christians, I think, would have discomfort with something that would advocate for that. On the other hand, that's the kind of issue where it is not so clear what kind of legislation would actually address that. If it isn't pretty clear what specific kinds of legislation we would advocate for, then we're probably going to back off of that, simply because good Christian people will have honest disagreements about what the most prudent approach to a particular problem is. And so the last thing we want to do is be a divisive element in the church. And therefore, we back away from immigration would be another example of that, or criminal justice reform. We've had people approach us on all of these things asking us to be active in that, and we have declined, simply because, first of all, we only have so much bandwidth. But secondly, they don't clearly meet the criteria that we meet, even though they're good, important things, and we would encourage individual Christians to be active in those areas. So, applying those criteria, then what are the issues that I will speak to? Well, there are really 4 of them. Caleb actually ran through them in my bio real quick. We will speak to the life issues, which these days encompasses primarily abortion and physician-assisted suicide. There are some other life issues that are emerging that at a future time we might speak to: surrogacy, IVF, things like that. Multi-genetic screening is another one that we're concerned about, but it hasn't yet risen to the level where we're going to speak publicly about it. So, life issues, marriage, family, sexuality, that cluster of issues, which I think, again, Scripture speaks to, our church body has spoken to, we are active in those. Religious liberty issues, that's one we feel very comfortable on very firm ground speaking to that. And then there is a particular form of religious liberty, namely parental choice in education. We will speak, we've been very active in that. So I hesitate even to get started into examples within each one of those. They are so numerous and so evolve so quickly that it's difficult. I'll just say that in Minnesota, the life issues have been high on our agenda priority list, simply because you may or may not be aware of it, but back in 2023, for the first time in a long time, there was a trifecta in a state government in Minnesota. The Democrats had control of the House, the Senate, the governorship, and, to be honest, the media, the mainstream media. And that tri or quadfecta, allowed them to enact radical legislation, particularly on the life issues, so that now Minnesota essentially allows for abortion at any time in any place, not just until birth, but actually beyond birth as well. And so we're now trying to clean up for that mess that was created by normally that kind of a close division of political interests means not much happens, but where you have a caucus, as is true with the Democratic caucus, they simply stick together. They do not vary. We can speculate as to why they're able to achieve that level of top-down control, but it's there, and it allowed them to enact some really radical stuff. We've already talked about transsexual issues. The state of Minnesota now, thanks to that trifecta a couple of years ago, if you cross the state line into Minnesota and your son or daughter expresses any interest in transitioning, and you as the parent are not interested in that, the state of Minnesota will now take jurisdiction. They'll take custody of your child, and good luck trying to get them back. The state then will arrange for the kinds of transitions that the child expresses an interest in, and again, you would say that's impossible, but it's not. We've also dealt with what's typically called the conversion therapy ban. That is where you're silencing counselors who want to speak to people who are uncomfortable with their sexual identity or sexual expression. That's now illegal in Minnesota as well. And there are many others like that. Religious liberty, that's probably been the highest profile for us. Back in 2020, I mentioned that we had the COVID worship restrictions that we took some pretty dramatic action on and were successful at. 3 years later, in 2023, the legislators changed our Minnesota Human Rights Act, including gender identity for the first time, and neglected to include a religious exemption. And so that required some real showdown work. That's the testifying session that I personally remember the most, testifying before a committee where there were 2 openly transgender people, and it became quite a showdown. We also have issues with our education system in Minnesota. DEI, woke concepts are being infused, not just into the curriculum itself, but anyone who wants to teach, get a Minnesota State teaching license, has to submit to those kinds of radical ideologies and actively promote them. So it's a real crisis for honest persons who want to serve in the public school system, but it requires them to essentially violate their conscience. And then, on an institutional level, the state of Minnesota also is forcing all colleges who offer teaching programs and Minnesota State teaching licenses to also offer all of those and advocate for them, all these woke concepts. So, in Missouri Synod, Concordia St. Paul, Wisconsin Synod, Martin Luther College, they produce a large number of teachers. Bethany, which were Ryan McPherson was previously teaching, all of them will be forced in similar fashion to violate their conscience. The state has not yet enforced that, but given the track record of our state, at least, very likely will. And those institutions will have to make some very hard choices. And then the most recent religious liberty thing, our state governor, in his latest budget, decided to remove all monetary support for non-public school kids. So our state for 50 years has had busing for all kids in our state, as well as a variety of different public health things that are for all kids. That was to be taken out of the budget completely. As you can imagine, that produced a great deal of pushback, and our legislature should have adjourned 2 weeks ago, but they're now waiting for a special session, and that is one of the things at issue. So that's one that we spoke to, clearly. We notified our congregations, schools, school communities about that. And then finally, parental choice in education. The most exciting thing happening there is on the national level. Whether you're aware of it or not, the big reconciliation bill in Washington that's hopefully going to be passed in some fashion, that contains a school choice issue. Currently it's a $5 billion program which will allow school choice in every state of the union. So even in blue states like Minnesota or California, Illinois, that holds some real promise for us. All right, I could go on so much longer, but am I out of time?
Yeah, we're
done.
We're at about 11:50, but we had a good Q&A in the middle there, and if you want to keep asking him questions, he'll hang around.
Sure.
So first of all, I'd like to thank you, Reverend Hinz.
Yeah, you're welcome.